Hey everybody.
Hey there.
Hi. I know you all are stupid excited for like the best workshop ever about data. So we're gonna actually go ahead and get started and make sure you know who the heck we are. So hi everyone, my name is Jessica Riker. I'm the Director of Revenue Enablement at Clio. I am essentially a glorified teacher, which means that I help all of our sales reps, our customer success folks do their jobs more effectively and understand how to talk to folks like y'all. I'm also a recovering attorney, and I've been in legal tech for quite some time. So I come with a lot of background and experience in this area, and I've been helping firms not only on the ground level, but also as my role currently as director to help firms be able to use their tools more effectively to do their jobs. So, but because I know about this much about data, I have my friend Ange here to fill in the gaps.
Hey everyone, so I'm Angela Welch. Everyone calls me Ange. I'm currently the manager of customer success operations at Clio, and then I also handle the GTM operations for our amazing Clio payments product. I've been in revenue operations for 6 years now, so I have worked with data in more ways than I can count or would bore you with the list. So it's been quite a bit of everything, and so I'm going to be here today to talk you through some key points about data and how that applies to KPIs. And yeah, let's take it away.
Absolutely. So we are gonna, I'm also gonna maybe figure out how to work the clicker. So our agenda today is we're gonna actually take a moment to level set. What is it that we mean by talking about data? What is it that we mean about talking about KPIs? And then of course, we're actually going to focus on what legal key performance indicators really look like, because we want this to be important and actually matter to your businesses. And then we will talk more specifically about data in Clio. So for those of you who are Clio customers, we'll walk you through some of that, but we'll obviously want to make sure that you all get the benefit. And then we'll end with the breakout groups and some Q&A, because it's not a workshop unless we make it weird. So please keep your questions handy. We will be coming around to them, and I hope you are all ready to participate, because as I said at the beginning, I am a glorified teacher, and I'm going to hope that most of you are willing to do so. So with that, let's actually jump in and talk about what it means to be data-driven.
Awesome. Yeah, so what does it mean to be data-driven? Being data-driven, that's such a buzzword. It's something that's thrown around all the time, and it seems like no one really explains how to become data-driven and what that even means, right? So the concept of being data-driven is that you are using data in order to achieve your goals, to make decisions, and to be able to actually use it to impact your business, right? And having that data in your back pocket, that's what allows you to drive towards it. So one of the phrases that we talk about a lot at Clio is what gets measured gets done. And this is absolutely so true, that honestly, if you're not measuring it, how do you know what's getting completed, right? Do you know how you're tracking towards your goals? Do you know what you're progressing on? And so we are going to be talking about key performance indicators, which really are about those metrics in the data that indicates how you're performing towards that target or goal that you set. So I'm going to start by talking about a couple different types of data and just words that we will throw around throughout this presentation. So the first will be factual data versus anecdotal data. So factual data that's the stuff that's in the report, that is the hard numbers, it's indisputable, it is there, right? And then you've got your anecdotal data. So anecdotal data is often, it's a feeling, or it's a comment that a customer makes, exactly. So, and honestly, it can come in multiple different ways, but both of these types of data are incredibly valuable, because that's how you tell a complete story. Then we'll talk about quantitative data versus qualitative data. So with quantitative data, that's your numbers, right? That is your how much revenue you're bringing in. How many matters did you open this month or close this month, right? It's something you can add up and really report on. And then you've got your qualitative data. And just do you want to give an example of qualitative data?
So
let's do it.
How many of you would say that client satisfaction is kind of a thing that matters? Yeah. Okay, here we go. Okay, well, so all right. So when we think about things like client satisfaction, if one of your goals, one of the things that you want to track toward is, I want to improve my client satisfaction rates. I want them to think that I am awesome every step of the way. Yep. So one of the things that you might do is you might actually say, okay, well, I'm going to do an NPS. I'm going to say 1 through 10. How much do you love me? How great was I at handling your matter? They'll give you a 1 through 10. That is factual and quantitative data. Qualitative would be something that is they had a text box they filled in to explain why they gave you an 8 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10. Then you, of course, have the anecdotal data, which is your paralegal saying, I heard them when they walked out, and they were so happy, and they were doing so great. And so that is stuff that is, again, also incredibly important, albeit not something that really can show up in a report. And so as we talk about KPIs and data today, know that there's different kinds, and they all have value, even if they don't necessarily show up in a report with hard numbers.
Absolutely, right? We need to be able to tell the entire picture. So what does it mean to get a 1 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 if you don't know the reasons behind it, right? If you just go strictly on numbers, a lot of times you're missing the story and you're missing what is going to become actionable about that data.
Yeah, so now let's take a second to actually level set on what it is that we mean by KPIs. So for those of you who already know this, just come along with us on this journey. But for those of you who do not, this is kind of how we're going to level set. So a KPI is a set of metrics. It's something that is quantitative over time. So you can have a lot of that data that is, again, measurable, actionable. You want to make sure that you're keeping track of it over time. And then you also want to make sure that it's measurable values that are used to evaluate how successful your firm is at reaching a target. So we're going to talk about this in a little bit more depth, but when we talk about goals and targets, that is one of the most important things that you'll want to think about when you're trying to assess your KPIs. And of course, we do want to make sure that it provides that clear target for your business. What is it that you're trying to work towards? So a KPI or a good KPI really comes down to 4 key things. The first, it has to be measurable.
Absolutely. You've got to be able to actually look at it over time, understand how it's progressing. If you have to be able to, really dig in and measure that data, it can't just be all anecdotal data, because like we said, can't track that over time.
Right, exactly. And the second thing is it has to be actionable. You need to be able to have a KPI that tells you what to do next.
Absolutely. Actionable data and actionable KPIs are so important. What does a metric mean? What does a KPI mean if it doesn't tell you what to do next? If it doesn't help inform your business, right? You need to be able to make decisions off of it and take it and actually make it mean something.
Right. And then the third part is it has to be aligned to your goals. So again, going back to our example of client satisfaction, you want to ramp up client satisfaction rates. You have to make sure that whatever it is that you're tracking aligns to that goal.
Yeah.
Right. And then the fourth part is keep it simple. So just brace your inner Michael Scott, keep it simple, right? And make sure that you're not overcomplicating the process so that it doesn't become harder than it has to be, right?
Yeah.
So because this is a workshop,
we're going to
make you talk to each other. So do us a favor, get together groups of 3 to 4. You can do it in your rows. You can do it in because you've got onesie twosies over here. Get together. I want each of you, whether you are a solo attorney, whether you are an attorney working at a larger firm, or you're part of admin staff focused on marketing, or you're a paralegal, whatever that is, and talk about one goal that you know your firm has, or maybe it's a goal that you think you should have. Again, thinking about what results you're trying to drive. We're going to take 2 minutes, get into a group, and then we're going to come back and I want to hear some examples.
All right, let's do it.
All right, let's start coming back, everybody. Hello.
Hello, up here.
Okay, first of all, I am everlastingly grateful that you all talked to each other and I didn't have to force it, so thank you for that.
It was very, very nice to hear all the chatter.
I told you that we were going to go around and we were going to actually get some examples of goals that you and your partners have come up with. So I've got my dear friend Sam here in the middle with a mic just to go and capture it. So I want 5 examples. Who's going to be the first and the brave soul? Yes!
Right at the front. Love it.
All right. First example of a goal that your firm has.
Determining profitability of a case.
Okay, determining profitability of a case. Amazing. Who wants to be the second? Yes, right here.
Determining profitability. We have a larger firm, so it's performance for our attorneys versus how much they collected in their billings and then how much we're paying them.
Amazing.
Awesome.
That's a really good goal to have. All right, I think there was another one here. 3.
Hi, Patricia DeFonte, Estate Planning, California. Right now, all the money comes from me, and I need the money to come from me, the lawyers, the clients, like referrals, and SEO.
Got it. That seems
Great one.
That seems legit.
Yeah.
I want money to come from more than just me.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay, who's going to be number 4?
Hi, Joe Huey from Brick Business Law, Tampa, Florida.
Hi.
So I'm the marketing director at the firm.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
so I'm constantly looking for the efficacy of our marketing activities. So how much spend are we putting in and how many qualified leads are coming out of that and converting.
I'm spoken like a true marketer. I love
Yeah.
it. No, it makes me happy. I'm here for it. Okay, and then 5 over here.
Awesome.
All right, last one.
Hi, Krista Hermance from Hermance Law in California. Ours is to get 100 5-star Google reviews by the end of the year.
Yes,
That's an awesome goal.
I love that so much. Okay, so
Those
that's
are-
phenomenal.
Yeah, those are awesome goals. I love to hear all of it.
So we're going to transition now.
Okay, cool. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of key findings from the Legal Trends Report this year. If you're interested in learning more about it, there's a workshop right after this one where they're going to dig into much deeper insights into it. But Jess is going to walk us through a couple of benchmarks for some of our key metrics that we think that law firms should be looking at.
Yeah, so a lot of you have talked about, like, I want to make sure that things are profitable. So let's start with the basics here. And I'm going to say basics with bunny ears, okay? So some of the basics. One of the things that we look at very deeply is utilization rate. So your utilization rate is the number of billable hours divided by your 8-hour day, because we all know we all only work 8 hours a day. Right? But come with us here. So the utilization rate is something that's really important to figure out throughout your day how many of those hours are actually billable, possible money in the door. We found on average 31% of your day is actually billable. Now, depending on the type of firm you're in, this is going to waver up and down. If you're solo, it might be a little less. If you're working in a larger firm with more support, you might have a little bit more. But on average, 31% utilization rate is what we found. Now, we're actually going to dive into this just a little bit deeper, because that's not, of course, the full story. The next layer here is realization rate. So the realization rate is, okay, I've got all these billable hours, but then how much of those billable hours were actually invoiced? And we found that it was only 84% of the total billable hours that were actually invoiced. So that cuts down your potential revenue a little bit more. And then the third thing that we looked at was collection rate. Your collection rate of all the billable hours worked, then of that, the proportion that were actually invoiced, of that, 89% was actually collected. So now you're just looking further down. So the reason I show you this is because these are some key baseline metrics to look at to figure out when you consider, and Ange will be so happy that it's the funnel that we look at in terms of everything that comes in and what actually comes out in the bottom in terms of revenue for your firm. These are 3 very key things that you can be looking at. What is your utilization rate? How many billable hours are you actually bringing in? Of that, what's being invoiced, and then of that, what's actually being collected. Knowing these 3 is really important, because as we look at the averages, by the time we get down to collection rate, it's actually only about 23% of your day that's collected.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's something that we want to make sure that we're highlighting.
Absolutely. And one of the things, if you are having trouble with your collection rate and you want to get that up a little bit more, you can come down to Level Up with Clio and we can talk Clio payments with y'all. Promise it'll help. All right, let's move on to some benchmark data.
Yeah, so as you know, we've been doing the Legal Trends Report for quite some time. We've actually looked at the billable hour index over the last few years. You'll see, of course, that steadily attorney hourly rate goes up. Non-lawyers tend to stay a bit stagnant, but we do see, of course, that it's going up. So we've been looking at this data for quite some time to be able to say to you, of course, that 31% is the aggregate average. But this was the one that for me was the coolest thing to find out, was exactly how to find out what is my case worth. Can I actually figure out what my work is worth? Because there's more to this than just, oh, I have an estate planning case, I make this much money versus, I don't know why you would do estates and divorce, but come with me here. So then you got divorced and that's worth this much to me. It's also about being able to understand how much time does it take you and how much money does it bring in the door.
Absolutely.
And so being able to calculate exactly what a case is worth is one of the biggest things that we can offer to you. And that's something that we want to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And because trying to understand what a case is worth when you think about the time, it's all going back to those goals. If your goal is pure revenue, I want to increase my revenue, you're probably going to look to do the most amount of shortest cases that give you the most amount of dollars in the end, right? But if your goal is maybe to get 100 5-star reviews by the end of the year, that might mean you take a little bit more time on some cases. That might mean that you actually reduce the profitability of some of those cases to provide more attention. And that's perfectly okay, but it's all going to go into the calculation, right? It's also going to depend on the type of case that it is, right? So you want to look at not just your billable hours, but also your non-billable hours. How much total hours goes into a case, right? And then figure out the amount that you actually get from that. That's where you start to understand, which cases should you be focusing on depending on your goals.
Yeah, exactly. And then to our dear friend marketer,
yes,
also which cases you actually should try, or like which types of cases you should try to get in the door.
Yeah.
So, and then of course we all went through a pandemic. I don't know if you heard. And some of the ways in which we communicate with our clients has changed. Their expectations have changed. And so one of the things we looked at again was to see what are our clients expecting from us. And so one of the things we saw was that 79% of consumers or clients expect a response within 24 hours. Now, back in my day, I used to mail stuff. And then I would send a stamped return envelope. How many of you also did that? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, and then you would get your documents back maybe 2 weeks later, 3 weeks if you're lucky. And then maybe you might be able to get them on their home phone line. That might be the best way to go. Now you don't have that option.
Yeah.
Now we're looking at a wildly different world where we need to be able to communicate better. So these are some of the things that we looked at specifically at Clio to help make sure that you're able to adapt to this new world.
Absolutely, right? And you want to think about benchmark data like this as context, right? So one of the examples that Jess was talking about earlier is client satisfaction. If you go and get a client that they give you a 2 out of 10 rating and you're like, what? How could this possibly have happened? I was so good. Well, maybe what you want to do is look at the context behind it. They didn't leave you any notes. They didn't leave you anything, but you go look at the matter and you're like, oh, it was 5 days between contacts, or it was 2 weeks between contacts, right? And now you can actually start to go, oh, maybe because I know that 79% of all clients want to be contacted back within 24 hours, this could be a contributing factor, right? And so this is why when you look at different data and you're going to collect it from all different sources, a lot of times all we're looking for is for a correlation, because then you can take that information and apply it to things like what can you do next, because you can measure it and you can action on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's circle back to those 3 key points that we talked about from the trends report. So how many of you are measuring all 3? Utilization, realization, and collection rate. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
20% of you? I'm so proud.
That's so good.
I am so proud of all of you. For the rest of you, do not even worry. Yes.
Right, you don't need to. Now's the time.
She's already ahead of us.
You know where we're going with this.
So for those of you who do not, thankfully, Clio helps you track this.
Absolutely. So Clio helps track these rates. We have a lot of reporting features within Clio. And one of the findings that we actually found in the 2021 Legal Trends report was that growing firms are twice as likely to use reporting tools. And that is such a clear sign, right? When you can actually track against your goals, when you can understand what does growing mean for me as a firm, that is going to put you in a position to measure that and then to action on it, to be able to understand what should I be going double down on, and what should I do less of, right? Where should I be focusing my energy? And that's exactly what reporting tools give you. They give you the insights and the visibility so that way you can actually understand how to grow faster, how to achieve your goals better.
Absolutely. And let's take a look at, and again, some of you are already ahead of us, but let's take a look at what this actually looks like in Clio Manage. Now, before you all start judging us, as it turns out, Clio is a really bad law firm. Yeah. We only have a 9% realization rate. So I'm just going to have you all, or utilization rate. So just do us a favor and give us a break, because as it turns out, Clio is a worse law firm than you all are. But we're going to use this as demonstrative. So
perfect.
take that into consideration.
Exactly. So I'm actually just going to use the top right-hand graph, which is the donut chart there, to explain to you a little bit about data and how it can show up in a report like this, right? So in that donut, we've got 3 colors. We've got blue, light gray, and orange. So the blue represents our billable hours, our light gray represents our non-billable hours, and just to remind me, non-billable hours would be things like...
well, the lawyerly response is it depends. So for those of you, for me, my non-billable hours were anytime I had to call a hospital to try and get medical records, or it was doing some legal research that I didn't think my client was going to pay for, commuting, that kind of stuff.
So it's pretty much anything else that's not billable. Okay, cool. So I got that. All right. So the third color that we see on here is orange. Orange is not a good color to see on a utilization rate, right? So what orange is representing is untracked. One of the things that as an operations leader I harp on constantly is the value of a none or unknown option in a pick list or in a field. And why I say that is because there are 2 different ways of approaching it. If you know the answer is non-billable or unknown, going into manage and selecting it as unknown or none or whatever is incredibly, just so much more valuable than just skipping over it. And the reason for that is because if you just skip over the field and you don't put anything in it, when you get to the end of the month and you see your 9% utilization rate and you go, what was I doing? So then you got to go back through your matters. You got to look at what you were actually doing and then try to figure out at the end, how do I improve this? Where did that time go? But by actually going in and filling in billable, non-billable, and even if you have to do a bit of adjustment at the end of the month, you're actually going to be in such a better place because it has to go into the CRM. That's what makes it data. That's what makes it reportable. That's what makes it factual.
Right, and any one of my sales reps that works with me knows that I say, if it's not in the CRM, it did not happen.
Yeah.
It's the same fundamental here, making sure that you're actually putting in the right information so that at the end, there's no questions.
Yeah.
Because again, one of the key elements of a KPI is making sure that it's actionable. And if you don't have everything in there that you need, you can't take action. It doesn't work.
Just leaves open questions and you're not sure what path to take forward.
Absolutely. So this is what it looks like in Clio Manage. So again, to our lovely lady right there, and to her point, all of this is tracked for you specifically within the system.
Yeah, so so the way it looked was, utilization, realization, and then collection.
Yep, absolutely. So now in Clio Grow, how many of you are Grow customers already?
Oh, wow.
And this will sink in. For those
Love
of you
it.
who are not, apologies, just power through with us. But this is what it looks like in Clio Grow.
Awesome. So this is an example chart of different lead sources, right? So when using Clio Grow client intake tool, you're going to try to be collecting as many leads as possible. One of the things that Clio Grow can do is actually have custom lead sources. So maybe you've got, advertisements and Facebook and LinkedIn, and then do we have any TikTokers in here? That is another place that you'd potentially want to put into Clio Grow to understand how many leads are coming from those sources, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, it allows you to be able to see, are my referrals actually closing and converting into your clients more often? Beautiful. Now I know every single time I close out an opportunity or I close out a matter, I want to make sure I'm asking for those referrals.
Exactly. And if you look at ours, for instance, right now, we are showing that our advertising agency is so good that we convert 100% of our leads that come from them. And the way that you look at leads is I'm going to go back to the funnel that Jess pulled up earlier. So the thing with a funnel is that, as you get the most leads coming in at the top, you're going to look at what is the rate that you're going to be able to get a consultation out of them, right? So that's your consultation rate. From there, how many of them become customers? From there, how many hours do you get to bill? And now we start going into utilization, realization, and collection rates to finally drop at the bottom, beautiful dollars. So, which I know, a lot of us want to have.
So the moral here is the more good prospects that come in the top of the funnel, the more money you make at the bottom. Yes, exactly. Seems pretty simple, right? Exactly. So, all right, now, we would absolutely be remiss if we didn't talk about, touched on this briefly, but it is absolutely vital that what you have inside of your system is actually useful and good data. So let's take just a couple minutes to talk about data cleanliness.
Exactly. And data cleanliness, Some of you may have heard of this before, clean data. Some of you may not have. I'm going to cover 4 primary principles that I use for creating clean data and for ensuring that my data stays clean. And no, it's not like putting it in a washing machine, running it through the sink, none of that. When we're talking about in our CRM, we want to start with consistent formatting. As an operations professional, you have no idea how much pain consistent formatting, or I should say inconsistent formatting, has caused me, right? So consistent formatting could be an example of if you're putting a state in the state field. Is it CA or is it California? And you might think, why does it matter? Well, if you have CA on one matter or contact and you've got California on another, and you want to go and report on how much money am I getting out of them, how many matters are coming from that state, you're now actually going to get 2 different values in your reports, right? It's not going to be consistent.
Another good example of that is if you have divorce and dissolution in your just pick one. Pick one, do divorce/dissolution if you feel like you have to, but this is what we mean by consistent formatting. Make sure that whatever you put in is consistent.
Yeah. The second thing, it's a clear understanding of what kinds of data go into which fields. So one of the things that can be very, very frustrating is if you go and put a bunch of numbers in a text field, and you're like, wait, but I can't calculate it, and I thought I put it in there. Well, it's because it's not actually set as a number field, right? And you can only calculate data in a number field. Same thing if you're trying to go and put letters in a phone number, right? And then you go to copy it because you have a note beside it. You have to be really clear about what kind of data is going into what area, right? What needs to be a pick list, what can be text, what should be a number. The third thing is rules and permissions for when and how and who fills out data points in your system. So why is this important? Rules and permissions for who fills out data, when it's filled out, it could be the difference between a report making complete sense and a report meaning utterly nothing, right? So one of the things that can happen is, let's use when, right? Sometimes you might decide that up until this point of the case, I'm only going to have these fields filled out. And then at this point of the case, I'm going to have these fields filled out, right? So you're going to understand that, yeah, I have a bunch of empty fields on my case. I'm not tracking a certain piece of data, but that's because I'm not at that point yet, right? So you want to have those clear rules to understand that. And then you also want to understand the how, right? So are you submitting it? Is it getting submitted to you through a form? Are you filling it out? Is it through an automation? All of those kinds of things like that.
Right, and another one is like, who does what at a certain point? Anyone ever had a problem where you're like, okay, well, you filled out the intake so wrong. Yeah, okay. So yeah, she's just like, yes, it hurts so bad. So making sure that if you only have like 2 people at the firm that you want doing intake, just only having those 2 people do it. Really, it's just about making sure that you're clear about who is doing what, when, where, and how.
Yep.
So that you do not have any questions about what is happening, so that when you look in your system and you want to be able to say, how am I doing against this KPI, you actually know the answer.
Absolutely, right? And then the last piece of it is duplicate and redundancy management. Anybody who's been a business manager or worked in operations knows all about duplicate management, right? So what happens when, I spoke with somebody at that event and then I went and created a contact for them, and then they came into the website and filled out a form, and then the other lawyer went and also created a contact for this exact same person. Now we've got 3 contacts for the same person floating in your system, right? And soon enough, if that keeps going, you're going to have 10,000 of them. Trust me, at Clio, there was a point where, oh no, I think I'm having some flashbacks here. Okay, so.
Anytime we talk about duplicates, it just makes Ange sweat. So we're gonna move on.
Yeah.
But just try and make sure that you're clear about not having them.
Not duplicates, and making sure that and this is where you look back at those 3 other rules and you go, an email goes in the email field, a phone number goes in the phone number field, because that is how you're gonna be able to accurately match your contacts and matters together so you can understand when a duplicate has happened.
Seems simple.
Seems simple. Trust me, it doesn't have to be.
So let's just do a quick poll. So what clean data sources are you tracking right now? What do you have right now that you're using? Sam has a mic. I want 2 examples. Referral sources.
Awesome.
Clean source for you? Yes?
Love that.
Okay, one more. Clean data sources.
That follows those 4 principles.
What do you got? I will call on people. I told you, teacher. One more. Websites. You have clean data coming from, yes.
Beautiful. That's a great one.
So those are really good. Those are really good examples of clean data sources. You want to make sure that everything that comes in, anything that you put into your system, actually gives you the data you need, right?
Yeah, and I mean, this is a great example of why, cleaning data sounds like something simple, potentially, very straightforward. Okay, well, maybe that's only to me. Seems simple to me. Got it. Let's move on.
Hold on.
Can I say, I know it's the answer because it was the one thing that we really focused on. We knew it was garbage.
Okay, so just to repeat for those of you who are like all the way over there, it's clean because you focused on it because it used to be such garbage, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of like leans into this idea of like making sure that you're mindful about how clean is my data so that you can actually start getting it more under control, right? Absolutely. So let's talk about how to actually track better data going forward.
Awesome. So I have 3 things that we can do to track better data. The first one, understand your different data sources. I touched on this a little bit when I talked about rules and permissions, but understand where is the data coming into the system from? Is it being put in by a lawyer, by one of the admin staff? Is it coming in through a form? Is it being done by automation? Because trust me, again, as an ops professional, I have dealt with enough automations that you think are going to work one way and then it works completely differently. And the only way to know where the problem in the data came from is to understand the source of that data to begin with.
Right.
The second thing, use common language within your firm.
If anybody wants to know how to invite Anne, ask her to run just a revenue report. And she'll be like, that's great. What are you talking about? So things like using common language, like when you say the word revenue, that could mean a million different things.
Mm-hmm.
So be really clear and consistent across your firm what you mean. Do you mean net or gross or monthly or annual or case, or is incredibly clear about what it is that you mean at a minimum, so that if you have any admin staff that specifically are the ones pulling that information for you, that they don't want to, they don't start sweating.
Oh yeah, trust me, I have been asked to run revenue reports more times than I can count in my life, and I cannot think of one time that I was right on the first try, because I can guarantee you it was somebody asking for something completely different. And so I learned very quickly, common language is just king when it comes to data. Know your terms and make sure you're using it all with the same firm, right? So the thing is from firm to firm, you might have different ways of saying the exact same thing. And anyone who's ever had to switch companies knows you get there and you're like, what is this jargon? I already thought I knew this. So honestly, common language from the firm, I've got to say it's probably one of my number ones. And then the third thing, and I know this is going to sound scary and it's going to be a lot, but define your data points in a glossary or data dictionary. Okay, so we talked about using common language. Now let's write it down. Put down, what are your data points? Where do they come from? What are the rules? How did you calculate it? You just need to have those written down and clear, because I'm guessing at least some of you in this room have had somebody leave your firm and take all that beautiful knowledge with them. And you go to run your report and you're like, how am I supposed to do this? I do not know what the calculation was. Right?
I don't even know where to find the matters. I don't know who the clients are. It's very, very stressful.
Exactly.
Right. And just to level set, a data dictionary does not have to be the sophisticated thing that an Ange would put together. So for those of you that might be a solo attorney and you have a Post-it on your computer, that counts.
Totally counts.
That counts. You do not have to be overly sophisticated. If you do not have something like this now, keep it simple. Just define for yourself. Maybe it's just you and one other person. Be really clear about what it is that you're tracking, what are your goals, and how are you going to get there. And then just make sure that you use the same language. And again, it can be a Google Doc, it can be a Post-it, whatever it is, a legal pad if we want to be on brand. Right? Just make sure that you write it down somewhere. And the benefit that you'll get from that is huge. So if you remember nothing from today, it is that you can find all of these things within Clio and write it down.
It will make the world of difference. I promise you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's move on and talk about, I'm just gonna talk quickly about one new feature we've got in Clio Manage when it comes to reporting, which is that we can now schedule reports, right? So one of the things that we can do, so let's say you've got your utilization report or your billings or deposits report, and you know that every Friday morning you wanna get it because you want it sent to your email so you can see tracking and measuring it over time, right? Now you can do that. You can set when and what day and what time you would like to have your reports actually sent to your email. This is going to allow, again, for that record keeping. It's going to allow for us to be able to all be talking about the same thing at the same time. It's a huge feature, and I use scheduling literally all of the time.
No, I know. And then, of course, with Clio Grow, matter, value, and source are two very key data points that you have. So please be sure that you're using those. Those are something that can absolutely help you. So for those of you who have Grow, this is absolutely something that can help you. And now, let's get weird. We're going to go into some breakout groups.
Let's do it.
Again, because this is a workshop, we're going to have you get into either the groups you had before or shake it up, do what you want to do. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to think about those goals that you had before, getting all of those amazing 5-star reviews, or maybe you want to start making money from someone other than yourself. Always a good plan.
Great plan.
Keep those goals in mind. Now what we want you to do is think about what key performance indicators can you use to help you meet that goal. Use the people in your group to help brainstorm and find ideas
100%.
that maybe you didn't think about before. And again, remember the 4 things that make a good KPI. It is 1, measurable.
2, actionable.
Aligned to your goals.
And 4, please keep it simple. We do not have to reinvent the wheel here.
Absolutely. Again, embrace your inner Michael Scott. And let's get started. So go into your groups. We're going to take maybe 10 minutes, no more, and start thinking about what KPIs you could use. And then we'll come around and we'll actually kind of grab some examples from you all. So go for it. Gather up.
All right.
All right, everybody. Come on back to me now, please.
Hello, everyone.
I just want to say the types of discussions you all were having, I did not get to all of the groups. Obviously, I'm not superhuman, but what I heard from some of you was phenomenal.
So great.
And so I'm so grateful to all the conversations that you had and how helpful you are for each other as well. So at a minimum, I'm so proud of you.
I know. I love to see the Clio community.
I know. It's
so good.
It makes me so happy. All right, so let's do this. We are going to take, because we've got about 20 minutes left in the session, I want to make sure we have time for Q&A because some of you have already had really good questions, and I want to make sure that everyone else in the audience also gets the benefit. So let's take 5 minutes. I'd love to hear from at least 2, hopefully 3 folks that want to tell us what was the goal you picked, and then what was at least 1 KPI that you were going to use to track progress toward that goal. So let's start. Who wants to be the lucky first?
Anyone?
Come on.
Someone's got to go first.
Yeah.
Perfect.
What do you got?
I'm coming. It's really fun. I have running shoes for this. I'm prepared.
Hi, Josh Barrett, Matchstick Legal from Portland, Oregon. We want to move 1/3 of our revenue to our subscription product.
Oh, cool.
It's a premium product, and most of those clients come from our existing clients, not new clients. And you gave us the suggestion we need to have more conversations and track those conversations. How many conversations are we having a month? What are they like? What results are coming out of those conversations, and how do we change it?
I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Also, you cheated because I totally told you that.
I gave you credit. Right?
I know, you're so great.
You're so smart. Thank you.
You are so welcome. And that's really, I'm really impressed to hear the subscription service model.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful that you are thinking that far ahead. It's such I don't know, how many of you have subscription services? A couple of you?
Oh, wow.
This is so cool. I'm behind the times, clearly.
Love to see this.
Amazing. Who wants to be number 2? Tell us number 2. Goal and a KPI.
Oh, yeah.
Yay!
All right, Dorsey Carson from Mississippi. The number one thing we're looking at is profitability.
Right.
For each, not just as a firm though, for each lawyer, but more so per matter. And so the realization rate and the collection rates are huge. what I've never heard out of this conference, I'm hoping y'all could tell me, is how to get that per matter. How to get I mean, the information's in Clio. We have that, but how do I get it per matter? And that's...
So I am going to cheat, because that's what I do. And because I happened to notice this lady's baller spreadsheet.
So I actually track my attorney's profitability using Clio's reports, and maybe we can speak a little bit later, and I can show you what I do on that spreadsheet so you can use it.
Great.
This is Mickey Wong of Yang Law Offices. Find this lady because her spreadsheet looks so good.
All right,
it's beautiful.
I cheat, but she's got it figured out. Absolutely.
All right, at the back over there.
Yay!
Let's do it.
Somebody play Rocky.
Run, Sam.
Music.
So one of the ways to actually track, easy ways to track profitability, if you calculate yourself an overhead rate, you can then actually track profitability for matters, clients, individuals, offices, whatever you need it to, right? So what you would do is you take all your overhead, calculate a rate for each individual,
Right.
and whatever they bill over that rate is your profit. Right, so
Yeah.
that's probably the easier way to do it, and that certainly will get you profitability from that.
That's a great idea. Love to see that creativity.
All right. So what was your name again, sir?
Rob McKay.
Okay. So anyone go find him.
He's got some great answers for you.
He's got the answers.
He's thinking creatively here.
All right. One more goal, and then we'll transition to Q&A. One more goal and KPI. Anyone from this side of the room? You all are so quiet, so bashful. Come on, y'all.
Y'all have no goals? Come on.
Let's talk about it.
It's all right.
Yay!
There we go. We got a volunteer.
Thank you.
Chris Davis with Davis Law. So one of my goals is to make the firm less dependent on me. And so when it was just me, it was fine, but now there's 10 attorneys, and so I'm trying to stop being the person that causes all the slowdowns. So, we were just talking and strategizing, and one of the things that we were thinking is I could start putting with activities in my Clio entries when I'm doing review of other people's works for different things. And then that becomes the KPI, because then I can sort by that to see how much time I'm spending on that, and then I can address it to delegate to others better.
Absolutely.
I love that. That is a great thing. I am a big fan of activity tracking.
I love that. Like, please don't talk to me nearly as much. Yes, and then we have a question back here. Sam, turn around.
Hi, I'm actually not an attorney. I provide leads to attorneys, but something that I'm trying to measure these days is what is the attorney's success rate with the leads, and get that feedback from attorneys so that then I can input that back into our attribution to bring in better and better leads for our attorneys. And of course, I know attorneys' time is super, super valuable, so I'm working on a way to collect that information more easily.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's
awesome. And so we'll go into Q&A here real quick, but just really briefly, remember your goals and your KPIs. Your goal should be, I want to move from X to Y, or I want to improve something by Y%. Or, it should always be something that, again, is really clear in terms of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right? Where do you want to be from now through to next quarter or next year? And then your KPI is what helps you to measure how you're going to get
Absolutely. And I do think one thing with data and reporting, which is kind of goes back to what you're talking about, is baselining, right? So baselining is oftentimes we're like, I've decided this is my goal and I want to move from X to 50. What the heck is X? So that's where we try to get our baseline data in. And a lot of times that's like that initial creation of the report. It's understanding what's happened so far. And then that way you actually have something to compare it to, because goals without comparison are just things.
Right, and that's what we talked about back over here, was just like making sure that you baseline first, figure out where you're at, and then how you might want to improve. Right?
Exactly.
Keep it simple. All right, so Q&A. Anybody have questions? Yes, Sam is coming with the mic.
So earlier you talked about utilization rate. Is there any way that you would think about that for people that don't bill hourly? Because we only flat fee bill.
That's a really good question.
I struggle a little bit with measuring efficiency in the same way, because I can't measure billable hours because we don't do it.
So one of the things I was talking with a group over there about, and when I talk about data dictionaries and common terms, and I'm not going to highly recommend this, but the scrappy version is that a billable hour can mean whatever it wants to you. Like you can say billable hour means casework and non-billable hours mean admin work. You can have that. As long as you're clear on that definition, you're able to actually understand it, have it written down, then your reporting can mean something very different. And this is why, again, having those common terms within your own specific firm is really important. So that's potentially a way to go about it. And I know that's something we do all the time. Sometimes you're limited by the number of fields or options you have, and you have to actually think about kind of a creative solution on how to make the report say what you want it to say. And that's my basic kind of a version of it, but I'm sure that our teams downstairs can also give you a much more Clio specific.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Rylas Dana. I practice in estate planning and probate, also mostly flat fees. And what I look at collections and then divided by the total number of meetings. And then I also look at collections divided by the total number of engagements. So what is my, I guess, kind of closing ratio? And then also of the ones that close, what is the average fee there? And then I can get in and look by practice area.
No, that's awesome.
That's
Those
a great,
are really great data points to look at.
Love it.
Love that. Oh, over here to the left, Sam.
Sam?
This gentleman had one for a little while.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, I was sorry. I'm more along this topic. So we did a lot of criminal work starting. It was what my firm was based on. It was all flat fees.
Yeah.
And then as I started going more towards a data-driven law firm, what I realized is that my lawyers didn't have any idea on how much money, how much effort they were putting in, how much time they were putting in.
Yeah.
So what I've done now is actually required them to keep their time even on the flat fee stuff, so that then you can see how much hours go into it, multiply that time their billable rate, and realize what you should be charging on some of these cases, and maybe you should not take some of those cases, because if it's a negative value case, as a general rule, then you should just be shedding those.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And that was like that data we were looking at from the legal trends report, showing like the value of it, like how much you make per case. And then, if you've got a ton of hours that have to go against it that you can't bill for, right, you might actually be looking at a negative profitability case.
Yeah.
So following on that, I used to do criminal defense and now do estate planning. That's a great suggestion in tracking your hours, because also if your client is dissatisfied with they might fire you, you've got to know how many hours you work on the case to routine and what to give back.
Yeah.
And the second is in estate planning, something that we've been talking about in our firm on this utilization rate idea is time on desk. So if it's in estate planning, depending on your model, you can have clients that if you send drafts out that sit on drafts for years, I don't recommend that model, but if you have a more controlled model where you have a process, you can say, well, we want to push through rate of 30 days, for example. And then you're measuring how many of your cases are sitting on your desk beyond 30 days. And that goes into what the other gentleman said, is then it becomes a negative case value if you then attribute a value point to the amount, what is the value of a day, right? So take your flat fee divided by 30 days in my example. Now you have the utilization rate price point, and you can measure it that way. That's something that we're starting to implement in our firm, because we have all these like hanging chads, right? So we want to increase your utilization.
Nice throwback. Okay.
That was a great throwback. I think one of the morals here is that there's so many different ways to be able to figure out what success looks like for you. Yeah. For some folks, especially again in the flat fee or contingency versus hourly, you're going to have lots of creative ways to figure out how to actually determine, am I being successful, and is my utilization rate effective?
And especially because we've heard profitability in, 5-6 different ways now. Yeah. And the reality is each firm's going to have their different version of profitability and their way of looking at it, right? Like for a state, it's by day. For others, it's by hour. And so it's a really interesting way to look at your data and to think about it creatively, and just understand that as long as you know what your definition of it is, that is what you can make the report tell you, right? Data is a story, and if anyone wants to talk about storytelling with data, I'm around. But that's really what a lot of reporting is, and a lot of data. It's about figuring out what is it that you want to be representing with that data, how do you want the report to show, and what do you want it to mean, and that's where you get into the fun stuff.
What other questions do y'all have? All the way in the back.
Sam's killing it.
She's getting her steps in.
Told you, running shoes.
Get on all the steps.
So one of the things I would suggest is if anybody's, so if you're starting with KPIs, if this is something you're just starting with, ask the questions. Understand what it is you want, what you want to report on. Understand what it is you want.
Yep.
Because so often you go down the road and once you get the reports or you look at a dashboard, there's just one element of data that you haven't been captured.
Yep.
And so it's so much easier to get right up front than actually go back and start filling in those gaps. So ask the questions and understand exactly what it is that you want to report on, so you make sure that you're actually tracking that data.
100%, man. Like the amount of times that I have to go back to somebody and go, so what, when, how often are you tracking this? You want to be really specific in the questions, right? Every report is an answer to a question, and you need to be able to be as specific as possible, thinking about, am I looking at last month? Am I looking at today? Am I looking at future? Am I looking at, who, what, when, like all of those things, and get as specific as possible. That is going to allow you to, like, again, remove the doubt later on, because I can't tell you how many hours I've spent rerunning reports.
Don't ask her about it.
I'm not traumatized.
What other questions do you have?
All right.
Phenomenal. All right,
you got one question over there? I see it.
Yay.
Two different questions. One, do people have kind of an expectation of like, what are your total overhead rates or ratios? I mean, has Clio ever looked into that for different types of firms? People say, oh, it's industry-wide, 50%, 60%, 70%. I haven't seen that ever thought or talked about. It's maybe out there in the industry. And then the flip side is I haven't seen anything like compensation models. I know we can track productivity, but that doesn't really answer a lot of things for us. It just gives us the data on the back end. So I'm always just curious if people said, oh, yes, we have the data to track on expense ratios, numbers, costs, hours. We track all that. We track billable, non-billable, we have flat fee combination. But then what do we do with it? What are the lawyers doing with it? It's like, I got piles of data. Now what?
Now I have all this data, and now what the heck do I do with it? So as far as I know, it hasn't been published in the trends report specifically around overhead, like what the benchmarks are for that, but that doesn't mean that the data doesn't exist. So I am gonna pin that for right now, but I do want to see if I can come back and find the answer on that one. So you'll have to come and find me later. There's also an LTR specific session like right after this in this room, so you'll be able to ask that question there as well.
Yeah.
But like once you get all of your, to the point you were making about like now I've got all this data, now what the hell do I do with it? So the reason why we continuously harp on have a goal is because if you do not know what it is you're trying to move or what it is you're trying to change, data is not useful to you.
Yeah.
All it does is give you a picture in time. And so you want to make sure that as you are thinking of KPIs, as you're pulling reports, as you're getting your data, you want to make sure that it is driving toward something you're trying to move or impact.
Absolutely.
Always make sure that there's a point to it. Because again, if you have a KPI, it has to be measurable, actionable, aligned, and simple. And all of those things matter just as much.
Yeah, and it's a matter of just being able to then pull them together, layer the metrics into the KPI, layer KPIs into goals, and then do that. So there is obviously an element of reporting, which I wish we could just be like, here's the answer to your questions.
Here's the answer to all of them.
I wish I had that. So yeah, I think that's one of those things that it's about just kind of like figuring out how they tie together and how they, stack up, and then that's how you get to kind of that end goal. And understanding that like we were saying before, as early on as possible, because then you know what questions specifically. So it's like, hey, I want to understand how much we should be charging. So that means I need to understand how much we actually are charging per actual hour or things like that, or how much we should be paying somebody. Right? You can start to like look at things that way. And that's by getting those data and that metrics and then figuring out how they layer together to lead up to that goal of trying to understand the question of what should we be paying somebody?
Great. So, okay, we talked through a huge amount of stuff today. Who is going to walk away with like one thing you're going to start doing when you get back to your desk? One thing you're going to do different. Okay, good. Some of you.
Perfect.
What are some of the, like, does anyone want to share, like, one thing that you learned? One thing that you're going to take away? Yeah.
Get over there.
Just clearly defining what the goals are.
Clearly defining the goals. Yeah. Seems so simple, and yet here we are. So just as you go back home, as you start thinking about this, remember that it's okay sometimes to start small. Take a small goal, take a small topic, take a small report or a small question, and just make consistent progress. I mean, that was what we talked about yesterday in the change management section. Move slow, and it's okay to make small elements of progress towards your goals, because at a minimum, you're continuing to move forward with progress. The more you overcomplicate, the harder it's going to be. So please give feedback to us in the app if you have any questions or anything you'd like to see different next year. Otherwise, thank you. Powered through 75 minutes on data.
That's so great.
Congratulations. And thank you all so much for coming to ClioCon.
Thank you.
See you all later.
See you later, y'all.
Bye, y'all.